Hey guys, Kurt here, and today I want to talk about science and spirituality and how those two things are becoming the same thing. And they really always kind of have been, if you think about it. And the reason that they've always been that way is because both purport to be investigating why we're here, what reality is, how does it function, where did all this come from, this physical universe, matter and energy, where did it come from, how does it work, what is it made out of, why, right? And they both have, historically, both of those things have had seemingly different ways of explaining what reality is. But today, things are starting to get really interesting because it's getting to the point where both are so close to like really having a solid foundation to converge, where someone who looks at science as different or separate from spirituality, those lines are getting really close to being blurred, is what I'm saying, right? A couple of housekeeping things I just want to address before I continue with this video. I think there might be two groups of people that are going to watch this video and focus more on petty, maybe that's the right word, petty talking points or nitpicky kind of things about some of the things I'm going to be saying and the ways that I'm going to be saying them. And those two groups are people that think this is weird and it doesn't make sense, and because it doesn't make sense, it can't be true, or people who think I didn't explain things properly or I left stuff out. So to the first group, I want to say that, I mean, I'm not, like, I don't hold a degree in physics or anything, but ever since I was old enough to read, all I've ever wanted to do was consume information about science and spiritualism. And music too, that's another thing, but that's neither here nor there. I just love music. But I am very knowledgeable about these topics. And you guys, let's face it, there's so much information out there about these topics. There's literally millions of books and videos and classes and just experts galore where you can find out about this type of information. So if you're the first group who thinks this is weird and it doesn't make sense, just, you know, you don't have to take my word for it. You can go look into this stuff. There's stuff on YouTube. There's books. There's a lot of information out there, guys. And it's not very hard to find what I'm going to be talking about in this video. The second group of people who maybe think I didn't explain things properly, just let it go. I am dumbing this down, so to speak, a little bit, because I don't want this video to be an hour and a half long. So I am leaving some stuff out. You might think, oh, I'm not explaining things properly, or I left this thing out, or whatever. Just let it go. I just don't want this video to be really super long. So I want to talk about where, like, what physics is, like the conclusions that they've come to up to this point, since modern physics as we know it has existed, and kind of this new theory that they have that they just proved like a couple of years ago that is, I'm looking at this theory and I'm going, man, you guys are so close. You're so close to merging these two things, science and spiritualism, in a kind of a textbook way that's concrete, that you can't really debate about, right? Like, it could be proven. We're moving beyond the realm of what is considered a theory and what is considered proven. And again, that right there could be a talking point that the second group of people who think I didn't explain things properly could nitpick over. For example, theories are never truly proven 100% according to the scientific method. Yes, I get that. So if you're sitting there watching this video and you caught that, just don't even bother leaving your comment. I already know about that. I'm a geek, guys. I love science. I already know all that stuff. Okay, so moving on. Here's the thing. Both science and spirituality are attempting to explain what reality is. And science, or modern physics as we know it, really kind of took off in the early 1900s, right? Late 1800s, early 1900s. That's when a lot of these concepts that physicists rely on today to explain what it is they're doing or how they're doing it, trying to figure out what reality is and how reality works, that's when those things kind of amalgamated, right? And in particular, I guess you could say modern physics there's two main areas of modern physics. There's quantum physics, which is the study of things that are very, very small. So what is matter itself made out of? We know that it's made out of molecules, which are made out of atoms, which are made out of protons, neutrons, and electrons, which are made out of quarks and neutrinos and gluons and these things. And it just keeps getting smaller and smaller. That's quantum physics, particle physics, right? How do things work on a small level? And the other area of science, physics, science, right, is concerned with like universal physics. So this is going to be, so whereas quantum physics is more like Niels Bohr, there's a very famous physicist who kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of what is considered quantum physics today, named Niels Bohr. The other would be Einstein, Albert Einstein, right? Which is, I guess you could call like universal physics, like large areas of space, so large that anymore you're dealing with questions of, wait a minute, is there just our universe or are there many universes? And if there's many universes, then I guess we would call that a multiverse. And gravity, how does that work? And how long does it take for light to travel across said universe? It could take hundreds of billions of years for light to travel across the universe because it's so big. And light travels at 186,000 miles per second. That's how fast light moves. And nothing can travel faster than light, they think. It would seem, right? There's a lot of people that have come forward with some very convincing evidence to challenge that notion, but for all intents and purposes, it's generally held as a rule in science that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. And that's what's so puzzling to physicists about the discoveries that they're making today. So in quantum physics, in particle physics, and where I'm going with this, so that you guys that are really just interested in watching a spiritual video, where I'm going with this, just so that you know up front, is I think what science needs to take into account is consciousness itself. Okay? And I've made plenty of other videos about this. Go to the main page of this channel, New World All-Star, and go to the playlists menu. And there's a playlist called The True Spiritual Journey. And there's videos in there where I discuss topics like, what is the soul? What is the self? What is me? What is that? And it's consciousness. That's basically what the soul is. And if you ask a scientist, or even just stupid Wikipedia, which isn't a real encyclopedia, by the way, but what Wikipedia says about consciousness is what the general scientific community says about consciousness. The consensus in the general scientific community is that consciousness is a product of the mind. And those of you in the spiritual community, you know that's not true. And I actually made a video about this called, What is the Self? What is me? And when you do the thing that we call die, your body ceases to function and your mind ceases to exist. All that's left is you. Pure consciousness, the soul, right? That's where you came from. That's where you're going to go back to. And your soul is a little tiny piece of source. We are all source. We are all source energy at our core at the end of the day. It's kind of like God, source, right? The infinite consciousness, whatever you want to call that, split itself into tiny little pieces of itself called souls, of which you are one and I am another. But we're all that same source energy. Well, anyway, the soul is pure consciousness. And I've discussed this before on this channel, and that's why I directed you to that other playlist. So when we ask the question in the spiritual world, what is the soul? what we think we're asking is, what is the substance of the soul? What is that? What is it made out of, right? And the answer, the most accurate answer, and this isn't even my theory, although I did come to this conclusion on my own years ago, and then the more interest that I took in spirituality, I started to discover, oh, this is what people have actually been saying for thousands of years, what the soul is. And I kind of figured it out on my own, likely because it's just obvious. If you think about it long enough, you can figure out what the soul is, right? Everybody has all knowledge in here. There's also that principle. So I'm not special for having figured that out on my own. It's just, there's a reason people in spiritual circles have come to this conclusion. What the soul is being. So what the substance of the soul is, the material that it's made out of, what is that, right? It's being. It's consciousness itself. And you're going, well, that doesn't make sense. Is it made out of hydrogen? Is it made out of helium? No. Well, is it magnetic energy? Is it gravity energy? What is it? Well, yeah, you're kind of on the right track when you say it's sort of like gravity energy. And you're kind of not. Again, I don't want this video to be an hour and a half long explaining that piece of it to you, but for the sake of brevity, suffice to say that the soul, what it's made out of, is energy. And that energy is pure consciousness, pure being. That's what the soul is. And again, the mind is going to go, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, what the hell is that? I don't know, dude. But that's what it is. You just exist. It's just pure existence. Okay? And another thing that's interesting to note, and again, this is something that's been discussed in spiritual circles for a long, long, long time, like thousands of years, is you can't really say that the soul is a thing. And you can't really say that the soul is not a thing. You can't say that the soul is a thing, and you can't say that the soul is not a thing. What? Right? But that's what it is. That's kind of what you're dealing with. And it on the surface, it looks like a little bit of a philosophical conversation. But it's getting to the point where it's going to start to become a material conversation, guys. Listen to this. This is where physics is at today, modern physics. Okay, I don't know if you guys knew this, but first of all, in quantum physics, a particle, like an electron, for example, it doesn't exist until it's been detected. Did you know that? You ask any physicist about that, and they're going to go, yep. And you go, well, that doesn't make any sense. And they go, well, it does if you kind of understand like the evidence and the experiments that have been done. And this has been proven for decades. Guys, this is old news, okay? A particle only exists when it has been detected. And we're talking like pre-World War II scientific evidence. It's so reliable, that principle of quantum physics, it's so reliable, that theory, that a particle only exists when it has been detected. That theory, that law, is so reliable that it's useless to even question it. But that sounds weird, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning of this video, about the two groups of people that might nitpick over some of the things in this video. That first group might hear that, and they go, well, it doesn't make any sense. An electron going around an atom can be in one place or all places at the same time. Let me repeat that. An electron orbiting an atom can be in one place or all places at the same time, in quotation marks. And it depends on what you're calling time, how big of a sampling you're taking, and that And when you take time into account or perspective, like how you're looking at the atom, that's when you bridge the gap from quantum physics to universal physics, from Niels Bohr to Einstein. Okay? As soon as you start taking time into account or perspective, if you're a little tiny person standing on the nucleus of an atom, and you're looking and you see an electron orbiting you, you're going to see the electron moving so slowly that it looks like maybe like how the moon orbits the Earth, for example, right? And it might take a whole month for the electron to orbit the nucleus that you're standing on. And from your perspective, it takes a month. Okay? Time in quotation marks. All right. Now, if you're a big human, a real human that's looking at an atom through a microscope, you're going to see a solid object where the electron should be. And this is why they call this an electron shell, because from your perspective, now you're a big human instead of a little tiny person standing on the nucleus of the atom. Now your perspective is different. You're a big human that's looking at the little tiny electron. It appears now that the electron is moving so fast around the nucleus that it makes a solid shell around the nucleus, and that's why they call those electron shells. If you remember from high school chemistry, they call that an electron shell. Well, anyway, so now you're taking quantum physics and blending in kind of universal physics, relativity, perspective. You know, that's kind of what Einstein was talking about in his general theory of relativity. And again, to the second group, if I'm not explaining something exactly what appears to be perfect or thoroughly, let it go. I know there's holes in what I'm saying sometimes a little bit, but generally I'm explaining it correctly. But there's a lot of tangents that we could go off onto. I don't want to do that because this video is already 17 minutes long, and I don't want it to go much longer than 20, 25 minutes. So anyway, so here's what I'm getting at, guys. If reality looks different from your perspective, consciousness is coming into play in this equation. If I am a little tiny person standing on the nucleus, I'm conscious of the electron and it looks like it's moving slow. If I'm an actual human looking down at an atom through a microscope, then I'm conscious in a different way. What's different about what's going on with that electron that's moving around the nucleus? Did it start moving faster? No. Your perspective is what changed. Well, if you think about like how science is always trying to look at things in a stripped down kind of empirical, mathematical way, how does my perspective change like 2 + 2 = 4? I'm just using that as an analogy. Like, why would how I look at a thing change how it acts? That doesn't seem to make sense in a scientific way or like in a Newtonian physics kind of way, right? Like Isaac Newton, which is like really basic physics for like elementary school kids, basically. It's lower level, it's physics that apply maybe to a person living on the surface of the earth. But once you move out into space or start looking at larger areas of space or small particles, that stuff kind of goes out the window a little bit. But it's really very basic stuff. Well, anyway, if you're looking at it that way, that doesn't seem to make sense. That changing the perspective would change how a particle behaves, but it does. And again, one of the basic tenets of quantum physics is a particle only exists when it's detected. Okay, here's a new thing that physics has recently, and I think it was 2017, when they finally came up with an experiment that really kind of proved once and for all that this thing called quantum entanglement is true and is a reliable theory. And they've repeated this experiment a couple of times. And it was in 2017 where they finally did like a big experiment using 2 or 3 like optical telescopes pointed at a couple of quasars, and just I'm not going to go too deep into the experiment itself, but anyway, they finally proved that this thing called quantum entanglement exists. And if you understand like the law of relativity well enough, or Newtonian physics well enough, it wouldn't make any sense unless there was some other greater field of energy beyond gravity or light that we as scientists, we don't know about. And I'm over here going, yeah, it's called a soul, dude. It's called consciousness. And oh man, you guys, science is so close, and they don't even realize how close they are. But the problem with science in general is it's like you have to be an atheist or something to be a scientist. And what's funny is most scientists are not atheists, although a lot of them are. But it's kind of like you don't want to mix those two things. And there's a reason for it. Organized religion maybe brings too much dogma into the topic of God and life itself and a discussion about what the soul is. So it makes it kind of difficult when there's all that dogma there, like rules and, oh, the 10 Commandments, you got to follow the 10 Commandments. And you see it even in the so-called general spiritual community, belief systems that people have where there's all these rules and structure and you have to do this and you've got to clear your past life karma and blah, 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 and all this limiting crap, all these limiting beliefs that are really just dogma. And so to a scientist, when they look at a thing like spirituality, they see the dogma and they go, we can't mix that with science. You can't really blame them for having that point of view. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say, wait a minute, just take all that crap out and just look at consciousness. And quantum entanglement is where you have a particle here and a particle here, and these two particles could be on completely opposite ends of the galaxy, and when one particle does this, the other one does that. Basically. That's basically quantum entanglement, and they both do it at the same time. If this particle here is on Earth, and this particle here is on the other opposite end of the galaxy, and you take this particle and observe it, this particle is going to, at the same exact time, do the opposite thing. Exactly correctly at the exact same time. These two particles are somehow connected, is what quantum entanglement is saying. Now, what's weird about this is, remember, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. And it takes tens of millions of years, guys, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 9 million years, or just millions of years, literally millions of years, for light to travel from one end of the galaxy to the opposite end of the galaxy. And if nothing can travel faster than light, then how is it that information is instantaneously going from this particle to this particle? How is it that something we do to a particle here on Earth is affecting this particle on the other end of the galaxy instantaneously? How is that even possible if that information cannot actually travel instantaneously from this particle to this particle? If nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, then how is this possible? And again, this theory called quantum entanglement that I'm now explaining to you, that if you do something to this particle here on Earth, it will have the mirror opposite effect to another particle on the other end of the galaxy instantaneously. Okay? That's quantum entanglement. So in order for that to be possible, there would have to be somehow an exchange of information between those two particles instantaneously, and that information should somehow be able to travel faster than the speed of light, which is not possible. Because it takes millions of years for light to travel across the galaxy. How is that possible? How is quantum entanglement possible? And again, they just proved that quantum entanglement is real. They just proved it like 2 years ago. And they've been doing experiments for decades that have been indicating that that is a reliable theory. And it was just 2 years ago. They did like a big experiment with the 2 telescopes and the 2 quasars that I was telling you about, where they proved beyond any doubt, no, quantum entanglement is real. But if quantum entanglement is real, then that throws the whole question of what is reality into question. Like what we think reality is. Like, is this real? Are these things real? Is this real? These bananas, my body, the air we're breathing, what is reality? The minute that somebody proved quantum entanglement, physicists threw their hands up in the air and went, well, fuck. What's reality? What the hell? Like, there has to be a reason why these 2 particles are connected that way, where if one changes, the other one changes in a mirroring kind of way instantaneously. And I'm going, yeah, it's called consciousness. And they don't get that. Like, consciousness itself is infinite. Okay? Light is limited. The maximum speed of light is 186,000 miles per second. Consciousness is instant. It's infinite. Consciousness itself is infinite. And you and I, in spiritual circles, we kind of get that. And here's the other thing, scientists. Here's the other thing, you guys, Mr. or Miss Scientist. In particle physics, if a particle only exists when it's detected, or what a particle is doing is contingent upon how you view it, and again, with my example of standing on the nucleus of the atom or being a real human looking down at an atom through a telescope, if consciousness somehow plays into whether a particle exists or not, or how it exists, the state that it exists in, obviously consciousness has something to do with how reality functions. And physicists, I don't think, have quite made that connection yet. Like, they're still in denial about that consciousness itself is this thing. Consciousness itself is not a product of the mind. But again, the conventional wisdom in the general scientific community about consciousness is that it's a product of the mind. And it's not. It's not. When you do the thing that we call die, your body ceases to function and your mind ceases to exist. What's left is you, which is pure consciousness, the soul. That's what the soul is. And again, science is looking at quantum entanglement and particle physics, and they're not making that connection, even though their own experiments are saying, yeah, well, how you look at a thing changes it. How is that possible? In a 2 + 2 = 4 sterile scientific environment where everything has to have proof and function, and it has to be what we can look at in a laboratory, and 2 + 2 = 4, and that's all. That's all there is to it. And your perception can't change anything. That doesn't make sense. But you guys are saying it does make sense. And again, quantum entanglement is taking this shit to the next level. Now, there is a conversation going on right now in the physics community, like astrophysics, right? Or quantum physics, where the discussion basically, ever since quantum entanglement was proven about 2 years ago, the discussion that these guys are having, you guys, I don't know if you guys knew this, but the discussion that they're having is maybe we do live in a 3D matrix reality. Maybe this reality is really kind of like a video game. That's kind of the way that physicists are starting to think about this now. And they're going, well, how do we prove that? How do you prove that reality isn't real and that it's somehow made up, or that there's some system or something that's making everything up as we're going along? Or is it that everything is predetermined and there's free will at the same time? And if so, how is that determined? And I'm going, every time you guys ask the word how, replace it with the word who. Right? Right? Like, if this reality is a 3D matrix reality, if it's not real, who is determining what reality is? Not how is reality determined. Because again, they're looking at everything in a completely like atheist fashion. And I don't have anything against atheists, but I'm sorry, there is a God, so to speak. It's maybe a better description to call it the infinite consciousness or source than it is to say the word God, because as soon as you say the word God, a lot of people bring in the dogma, there again with dogma, right? Which doesn't help you answer these questions about what is reality. How does this shit really work? Because we know dogma is just stupid dogma, and it would really be nice if dogma would just go away so that we can have a real serious discussion about what reality is, which is what I'm trying to do. Okay, and that's what scientists really are trying to do too. And again, they're so close, you guys. They're so, so close. The only answer to explain quantum entanglement, as far as I'm concerned, is that there is a field that precedes reality as physics knows it, called consciousness, source, God, the infinite consciousness. Think of it like the space-time or the space-time continuum or the fabric of space or gravity. It's like space itself, when you think about it in Einsteinian physics, like gravity is where you bend space itself. And so you got to ask yourself, well, if gravity is where we bend space itself, then space itself must be some kind of a material or some kind of a fabric. And then you're going to have a conversation about dark matter, which they are very sure there is such a thing as dark matter, because they can't account for, I don't know, I think it's like something like 89% or 93% of the mass of the universe, and so they're thinking dark matter has got to be what it is, and the dark matter is the space in between actual things that we think of as something that's not there. And anyway, it gets very not philosophical, but very you can go down any one of these rabbit holes, guys, and trying to understand reality can be confusing if you haven't, I guess, studied these things for a long time. But anyway, what I'm saying is, yes, there is a field behind even like the fabric of space itself, that the fabric of space itself exists within, and that's called consciousness, being, right? Again, what's the substance of the soul itself? Consciousness. Existence, being. And again, science has for decades, for over 100 years, they've already been saying things like, well, a particle only exists when it's detected. Well, if a particle only exists when it's detected, then it only exists if we're aware of it. So awareness, consciousness itself plays into that equation, Mr. Scientist. Hello? McFly, hello? Think, McFly, think, okay? Seriously. And now, with quantum entanglement, once again, the only thing I think that could really explain that would be is if there is this field of reality that the field of space-time already exists within, called consciousness. Okay? That's how thoughts can travel to you, from you to another person instantaneously. That's how a psychic can see events in the future. Okay? Because consciousness precedes space-time. Consciousness itself. And I think probably DARPA, and if you don't know what DARPA is, go check it out. And don't just see what Google has to say about it. Maybe watch YouTube videos for a while and listen to what scientists say DARPA is, and listen to what conspiracy theorists say DARPA is, okay? And then make your own decision about which one of those two is right, and maybe there's components from each point of view where these guys are telling the truth and these guys are telling the truth, and some of this stuff is bullshit and some of this stuff is bullshit. You decide what's true and what's not true between those two perspectives. But DARPA is a military organization where they look at these secret kind of black ops kinds of things, And how much money you want to bet DARPA is already talking about what I'm talking about in this video. Like they're like, yeah, we want to make a spaceship that can travel instantaneously across the galaxy because we're DARPA, and that's what we do. We make secret technology like that. And they're not going to be afraid to have a conversation that a conventional physicist is afraid to have, because they've got money to waste on these secret projects, and maybe something, some fruit will come of that. One example is remote viewing. Remote viewing was something that the military, and I believe DARPA was one of the organizations that was behind remote viewing. They poured a lot of money into that secretly, and then later they go, oh, no, remote viewing, no, that's a conspiracy theory. We never did that. But here's the thing, like, you know that the government, right, the military, DARPA specifically, it helps if you kind of understand how, if there is a secret black ops system, that it kind of helps if you understand how it supposedly works, right? Well, anyway, they're not afraid to look at shit like this, you guys. And my whole point in bringing that up, I don't want to open up this whole can of worms about conspiracy theories and stuff like that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are people, serious minds, who don't have any problem because they have access to unlimited money, right? DARPA. But they don't have any problem looking at these things that I'm talking about and taking them seriously. But a conventional physicist like Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's not going to get up there and just right out the chute like say, yeah, there's a correlation between quantum entanglement and this substance called consciousness. If you tell him that consciousness itself is some kind of substantive thing, he's going to say, no, it's not. It's a product of the mind. And that's what you're going to get from your average physicist. But at the same time, even the average physicist, including Neil deGrasse Tyson, they're doing little talks. I don't know if you guys have seen any of this, but even guys like him, they're talking about things like, we think that reality might be a 3D matrix reality, like a video game. Like, this is some of the conversation that they're having today. Seriously, like, they really are starting to question if reality is real. But then they turn around and they go, well, there's got to be some explanation, though. And I'm going, yeah, it's called consciousness. It's called God, if you will, right? Source, the infinite consciousness, consciousness itself, the soul, right? That energy, okay? And you guys, again, you guys say yourself, you guys say this yourselves, that a particle only exists when it's detected. For example, that's just one thing. When we're aware of the particle, or how you look at a particle affects how it acts. That's another thing that you guys are saying. Well, yeah, but I know, but we have to be able to prove this. All right. Anyway, guys, that's my 2 cents. I hope science figures it out. I hope they make this connection because there is the chance for unlocking the unlimited potential of humanity. And I hope it happens soon. Humanity is awakening, so I get the impression that it probably will anyway. All right, so I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.